Folk tales. Folk tales and fairy tales, I love them. I tell them all the time, and I think about how they've been passed along from generation to generation to generation. And if there's any problem I can see with folk tales and fairy tales, it might be that they've been told too much. So often that people stop listening. You start to tell a story like, once upon a time, there was a beautiful young girl named Cinderella. And sometimes you'll see people kind of go, they've heard it so many times. I was speaking to a friend of mine up in Canada. Tell him, what can we do? How do we get people to listen to these folk tales again? And we realized all you had to do was pretend that the fairy tale was laid out on a board, almost like a Scrabble set, and throw the letters around. Mix up words. Then you could tell the same story, but people would have to listen a lot more closely, as if they're hearing a new language. And then you could tell the same story, but it would draw people in. I'll give you an example. That same story I began, the story of Cinderella that most of you have heard at some time in your life. If we laid it out and threw those letters up in the air and they came down with mixed up words, it might sound like this. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful girl named Rindercella. Now, as the story goes, Rindercella was not Harry Vappy. Not Harry Vappy at all. As a matter of fact, Rindercella was Sari Vad. Sari Vad. And the reason for this was Freethold. You see, she lived with her muggly other and two stick-it web sisters. And they made Rindercella work Harry and Vard. Harry Vard. From upsun to downsun. She had to cake and to book and to screen the flinty doors and to wean the dirty clindos. And then, gnar into the fight, while others went to sleep, she had to stay up and sarn their holy docks. Life was aught and easy for Rindercella. But a lay of right on the horizon. You see, in a car corner of the land, there lived a Pransome Hints. And our Pransome Hints was also Sari Vad. Sari Vad. The reason for this is that, well, he was still looking for that one Gesell sparrow to whom he could hive his girt, with whom he could live his spife. The simple matter of the matter was that our Pransome Hints was longing to loll in fove, but Fosar, lo nuck. We join our Pransome Hints as he lustriously cases the comely lord of the Poyoralis. And suddenly he has an idea. I have it, he exclaims joyfully. I'll have a boil roll right here at the Poyoralis. And I'll invite all the beautiful girls from the car corners of my dinkum. It's just what he did. And in true Boristuk form, Rindercella's muggly other and two stick-it web sisters were invited. And although she could not go, she was morced into faking 3 Drew Nesses, complete with batten sloves and sluffy peeves and Lily Fracing hounding the rems. We joined Rindercella on the night of that boil roll, as she is peering sadly through the wing clindo, as she sees the other 3 head off round the dode, going to the boil roll, where they will meet the Pransome Hints. Overcome with grief, Rindercella flipped to the floor, tedding great shears. Suddenly, there was a lash, a flight, a blinding blash, a flight. And who should appear in the room with her? Gary Fodmother. Gary Fodmother looked at Rindercella, and she said, "Oh, Rindercella, what you crying for?" No, we don't really know why Gary Fodmother turned out to be Italian, but it just happened. Rindercella looked at her and says, "Gary Fodmother, it's not fair. I don't get to go to the boil roll because I don't have a darty press." "Oh, don't cry, Gilly Thurl. I'll make you a darty press." And with one wave of her magic man, Rindercella was dressed in the most beautiful darty press anyone had ever seen, complete with 2 tiny slash skippers, one for each finey toot. Soon, Gary Fodmother went over and peered through that wing clindo, and she saw in the yard a large orange Pat Fumpkin. She took out her magic man. She turned it into a clendid splotch. And then looking about Rindercella's room, she saw that she had 3 met pice. One wave, and they were turned into 3 beautiful stallions to pull that clendid sploach as Rindercella traveled to the Boyle Rall. Soon Rindercella was on her way to the Boyle Rall with Gary Fodmother's final warning inging in her rears. Be back by the stroke of midnight, because that's when this spell wears off. Rindercella arrived at the Boyle Rall, and in true Borsuk fashion, our handsome prince took one look at her and he raced across the flange door. He took her in his arms. Oh, it was fun at first sight. They spent the entire evening dancing, gazing gistfully into each other's eyes. And soon Rindercella had also lollen in fove and lost all track of time. She was horrified when she heard the walk on the claw strike midnight. Midnight! She pulled herself out of the eager arms of the pransome hints, pulled herself away, turned and ran across the flange door, through the thors and down the dares. But just as she reached the bottom, she slopped her dipper. The pransome hints coming down the stairs. Host beclined her. He picked up the tiny skipper, and he vowed to cease searchlessly until he found the maiden fair that had slopped her dipper at the Boyle Rall. He went to almost every house in the kingdom, but eventually he came to the home of Rindercella's muggly other and 2 sticked web sisters. I'm glad to tell you that when he tried that tiny skipper on Rindercella's muggly other and her 2 sticked web sisters, it would knit fought their fig beat. But when he tried it on Rindercella, it glimpsed slightly into place. Rindercella, she smiled at the pransome hints, and she reached into her pocket and she took out the matching tiny skipper. She handed it to him, and smiling, he placed it on her foot, and it glimpsed slightly into place. He looked at her, and by her having the matching tiny skipper, he knew without a doubt that this was the fated mare that had slopped her dipper at the Boyle Rall. He was completely in love, and soon they were married, and they lived happily ever after, as why should they not? That's the story of Rindercella.